All right. So,
So,
first
first
up,
up,
yesterday
yesterday
I
I
was
was
live
live
streaming,
streaming,
and
and
apparently
apparently
there
there
was a
was a
lot of
lot of
echo.
echo,
So
so
I'm
I'm
trying a
trying a
different
different
setup
setup
with
with
my
my
microphone.
microphone.
I
I
got up
got up
very
very
early
early
today.
today.
I
I
had a
had a
lot of
lot of
things to
things to
add,
add,
so
so
I'm
I'm
leaving
leaving
uh,
uh,
for a
a
little
little
bit.
bit.
I'm
I'm
traveling a
traveling a
little
little
bit,
bit,
so streaming
streaming
for a
for a
while,
while,
I
I
think.
think.
Uh, but and I
And I
also have
also
work in
work in
about
about
30
30
minutes
minutes
from
from
my
my
office,
office,
so
so
I'll
I'll
take it
take it
here,
here,
but
but
that
that
will
will
be
be
fine.
fine.
So I'm
So
a
I'm a
little
little
bit
bit
tired,
tired.
but that's
That's
but
but
if
if
you
you
checked in
checked in
yesterday,
yesterday,
we were
we were
working
working
on the
on the
voting
voting
feature.
feature.
So I'm
So I'm
just
just
gonna
gonna
briefly.
briefly.
This
This
is
is
goal
goal
path.
path.
I have
I
an
have an
empty
empty
project, so
project, so
nothing's
nothing's
going
going
on.
on.
This is
This
the
is the
dashboard.
dashboard.
Basically, what
Basically,
I'm
what I'm
doing
doing
is
is
I'm
I'm
goal
goal
path
path
is
is
currently
currently
sort of
sort of
like
like
a
a
issue
issue
tracking
tracking
tool
tool
with
with
a
a
team
team
can
can
work
work
and
and
develop
develop
a
a
software
software
in.
in.
But I
But I
want it
wanted
to
to
be
be
primarily
primarily
focused on
focused on
roadmaps,
roadmaps,
and I
and I
want it to
wanted to
be a
be a
place
place
where
where
developers
developers
and
and
stakeholders
stakeholders
and
and
like
like
people who
people
are
who are
not
not
developing but
developing but
working in
working
the
in the
same
same
software
software
development
development
company
company
can
can
come
come
together
together
and
and
real
real
time
time
see
see
what
what
kind of
kind of
progress are you
progress are you
making on
making
the
on the
roadmap,
roadmap,
how
how
are
are
you
you
prioritizing
prioritizing
both
both
as
as
like
like
on
on
the
the
strategic
strategic
level
level,
but
but
also
also
on
on
the
the
operational
operational
level when
level
working with
with
software.
software.
So
So
just
just
to give
give
transparency,
transparency,
and I
and I
wanted to
wanted to
focus
focus
primarily
primarily
on
on
keeping
keeping
high
high
velocity
velocity
or
or
sort of
sort of
good
good
throughput
throughput
on the
on the
development
development
team.
team.
So,
So
therefore, the
therefore the
dashboard
dashboard
focuses on
focuses on
work in
work in
progress,
progress,
defect
defect
trends,
trends,
velocity, of
velocity, of
course,
course,
and
and
then
then
there's the
there's the
thing
thing
called
called
highlighted
highlighted
items,
items,
where
where
developers
developers
can
can
highlight
highlight
items
items
if
if
they
they
feel
feel
like
like
there
there
needs to
needs
be
to
a
be a
code
code
discussion,
discussion,
if
if
they
they
feel
feel
blocked or
blocked or
whatever,
whatever,
they
they
need
need
external
external
people
people
coming in.
coming in.
But we're
But we're
working on
working
the
on the
voting
voting
feature.
feature.
So the
So the
voting
voting
feature
feature
allows
allows
the
the
stakeholders to
stakeholders to
come
come
in,
in,
and on
and
the
on the
milestones and
milestones and
goals
goals
that you
that you
set
set
up
up
in the
in the
roadmap,
roadmap,
you
you
can
can
actually
actually
vote
vote
on
on
business
business
value.
value.
This
This
gives
gives
sort of
sort of
it
it
takes
takes
people
people
out
out
of the
of the
mindset
mindset
of
of
um, you know, whoever
whoever
screamed
screamed
last
last
or
or
the
the
customer
customer
you
you
just
just
visited
visited
who
who
were
were
like,
like,
instead
instead
of
of
just
just
having
having
that
that
mindset,
mindset,
voting
voting
and
and
sort of
sort of
trying to
trying to
assess
assess
things
things
from
from
different
different
perspectives,
perspectives.
it
It
takes
takes
people
people
into a
into a
more
more
strategic
strategic
mode of
mode of
thinking,
thinking,
and
and
also
also
developers
developers
estimates
estimates
effort
effort
and
and
quite a
quite a
lot.
lot.
So
So
why
why
not
not
estimate
estimate
business
business
value as
value as
well?
well?
Because
Because
that
that
actually
actually
forms
forms
some
some
really
really
good
good
basis
basis
for
for
good
good
prioritization,
prioritization,
and
and
also
also
for
for
aligning the
aligning the
roadmap
roadmap
with
with
stakeholders and
stakeholders and
other
other
people
people
in
in
your
your
team
team
and
and
like
like
external
external
parties.
parties.
So it
So it
makes it
makes it
very
very
clear.
clear.
So
So
GoalPath
GoalPath
has
has
four
four
different
different
models
models
for
for
prioritization.
prioritization.
They're
They're
all
all
very
very
simple.
simple.
They
They
are
are
based
based
on what
on what
seems to
seems to
be
be
popular
popular
models
models
out
out
there,
there,
and
and
then
then
of
of
course the
course the
one
one
that
that
we
we
use in
use in
our
our
team,
team,
which is
which
the
is the
weighted
weighted
scoring.
scoring.
But
But
it's
it's
basically
basically
impact
impact
versus
versus
effort,
effort,
RICE,
RICE,
which
which
is
is
reach,
reach,
impact,
impact,
confidence, and
confidence, and
effort.
effort.
And then
And then
Moscow,
Moscow,
very
very
simple,
simple,
must,
must,
should,
should,
could,
could,
won't
won't
have.
have.
Uh, and
And
then the
then the
weighted
weighted
scoring,
scoring,
which I
which I
personally
personally
prefer
prefer
because
because
it
it
really
really
helps to
helps to
drive
drive
adoption
adoption
and
and
make
make
stakeholders
stakeholders
feel
feel
that they're
that they're
making
making
these
these
decisions
decisions
based
based
on
on
criteria
criteria
that
that
is
is
aligned
aligned
with
with
how the
how the
business
business
operates and
operates
the
and the
business
business
goals,
goals
if
if
you
you
set
set
them
them
properly.
properly.
And
And
that's
that's
probably
probably
something
something
that I
that
will
I will
talk
talk
about
about
later.
later.
But
But
we've been
we've been
working on
working
the
on the
voting
voting
feature.
feature.
So
So
once
once
this is
this is
all
all
activated,
activated,
stakeholders can
stakeholders
go
can go
in and
in and
sort of
sort
get
of
a
get a
voting
voting
dashboard.
dashboard.
There are
There are
other
other
parts where
parts
this
where this
shows
shows
up
up
as
as
well,
well,
but
but
we're
we're
focusing on
focusing on
this
this
one
one
because
because
that's
that's
my
the
main
main
feature
feature
development
development
right
right
now,
now.
where
Where
it's
it's
milestones
milestones
that you
that you
need to
need to
vote on, and then you have built it on. So the idea is that you sort of have a index to zero approach where a stakeholder can go in, preferably on their phone. They have a few minutes over, think about the different milestones or features that they're currently developing, and then vote on them accordingly. There are other parts to building the roadmap as well, but that's not what we're going to talk about. So I've been building this out, and I've been using AI for part of it, and especially Copilot with Claude. And then I switched to the ChatGPT model, and it started behaving very differently. And now I have a lot of things to clean up. And I also want to clean it up because if I'm going to use more AI on developing this and I want it to actually save me time, the more examples I have of clean code in my system, the less it will diverge. The more I have various options for it to read, the more diverse my code will be and the harder it will be for me to maintain it. So I don't want that. And yesterday we were looking at this cast vote feature, and we actually got it working because the format for the criteria that we needed is not really clear. We added a few to-dos, and I think my idea is we're just going to give this 20 minutes, work a little bit with this feature. I found some other places to duplicate the code as well, so we're going to clean that up, but I won't manage to do today. But there's a little bit of cleaning we can do in this one. For example, I'm not super happy that the framework ID is an input coming from the client. We're on the server. We're going to fetch the project anyway because we need the project to sort of set things. So we should work on the settings that the project is saved for, not what the UI thought it was at the moment, because that will cause bugs in where someone kept a tab open for 2 months on their web browser, and then when they started loading, then all of a sudden the system gets really weird. So not too happy about that. So we're going to clean that up today. I think by doing that, we can also see that some of the stuff we did yesterday, we can actually do better. There's a to-do here where like we send the framework in. I think there's another way to solve this that will actually clean some of this stuff up here, or at least make it a little bit easier to understand. But we're going to start with actually the inputs to what we're working with here. Because also milestone ID is actually not something you want in the input, and I'll show you why. But to do this, because I want to change how this works, I should start by first changing my model. So I do have I'm using a code generator called Play that I wrote myself. We're using it both on this project and a lot of other projects, and especially at work that I'm going to in 30 minutes. What it does is you describe declaratively what your main model looks like. And then it uses templates that are handlebars with a lot of extra helpers on it to generate the code. And that gives you very consistent code, and everything behaves the same way. It's wonderful for validation and making sure that everything's aligned. So it actually enforces the architecture. So it's a very nice complement to the LLM generators that are very random. This one is anything but random. But we actually want that. If we want to scale the software, we want to have patterns in place, and we want the patterns to be enforced. So because I have this, I can generate TypeScript that actually creates a code base that's a little bit more like filling in the blanks. And if I find a bug in the generated code, I fix it in the generated code, and that is then applied to everywhere that is used. So it's very powerful when you actually start getting momentum in using it. So we're now we have the main model, we have actions on them, and that's what I use for it. And we have the cast vote here, and there's not a lot of text here, but I can briefly tell you what it does. So this one says it can create something. It's on the milestone. It can't create milestones. I'm actually going to move that. That was not correct. Skip form. I made a custom front-end code for handling the votes. So if I do skip form, Play won't generate any forms for this. But otherwise, I will have ready-made forms ready to go that I can just use if I need to. Of course, a description a little bit of what this one does, and then who can do it. And it's basically, right now, it's stakeholder and owner and collaborator. And to be honest, I wanted to just be the stakeholder and owner for now. The reason for that is the stakeholders prefer it that way. And then we can see here, the ID is a field that I sort of enforce. It's here because it's easy to read, but if there's an ID field, I will actually look up the milestone because this is on a milestone. And then I will check the user access and everything for that. And that means the milestone ID is surplusage. We don't need it. But because the ID field would not only validate that this entity exists, we will load it, we will make sure you have access. So we get a lot of extra of that. Stakeholder ID is basically, it's the stakeholder who's loading. That makes sense to send it in. I could pick it up from the context, but I don't want to change too much at the same time. So let's start with just removing the milestone ID and framework ID for now. Just to reduce the amount of loading. And then this one is probably, yeah, we're probably going to remove that one, going it forward as well. A future enhancement here is to actually define the type of the JSON input here. That would actually help the TypeScript to help me find bugs quicker as well. So these two changes will now remove two parameters that are unnecessary. We're just going to see how that works. So I type here, create generate. It will give me a lot of output, partially because I did create scripts, so I can use Google's Gemini CLI to implement actions if they're there. But they are running, like if I do too many of them, I literally burn through my credits in 10 minutes. It's insane when you run multiple things on the same workplace. And the results are unreliable, so I need it to be a little bit more sane when it does that, but that's not what we're doing today. So now I actually changed the code. I didn't generate a new infrastructure code for it, or like the piping code. So if we now go to the cast vote, we can see that the TypeScript types for the input have changed, and we don't have a framework ID, we don't have a milestone ID. But we do have an existing entity that is the milestone. So we can replace all the milestone IDs. Let's do it all at once. So this is actually quite quick, but it's not going to compile, but it's a quick milestone. Quick refactor, it's not going to compile, but it's still reasonably fast. Thank you, Copilot, for catching my spelling mistake. All right, there we go. That's one. And this one can be null. That's not true. There we go. And it could be null if this had can create true. So I know for a fact before I remove that option of having it as a null, the part that calls this code had a TypeScript error because, it's always allowing, it will never send null. However, if I add can create again, then it would give me a TypeScript validation error. So that helps, I guess. Now we have the input framework ID issue here, but we're loading the project regardless, so we can move that here. And we know that it always has a project because that's an invariant or like a constraint that we have. So let's get the framework ID from the project instead. Project dot prioritization framework ID. There we go. Now this one complains. Can be honestly, if you're in the cast vote feature, we can actually assume that this exists. So let's just do that. That's a little bit of a cleanup. Optional chain can only return undefined. So by adding if, no problem, new error problem not found. There we go. That's actually quite helpful, even though it's annoying. There we go. Now we can remove the to do. Sorry about that. Thank you for pointing out the echo. I will see what I can do about it. How is this? Is the echo better now? All right, I'm going to continue. There was a mic setting that I changed. Hopefully it's better. It's better. There we go. Let's see. Stakeholder ID, we're going to remove this to do. Awesome. Figure out the echo thing. I'm actually very grateful for that. So thank you very much. Last thing, last but not least, we need to update the milestone where the existing entity, that's the spelling mistake. There we go. We actually removed two of the to-dos, or one of the to-dos. However, we're still going to do that one. But I know for a fact that this is still not compiling because we actually did some major changes. We need to fix the inputs and we need to fix the test. Let's start with fixing the TypeScript by running the build. Do, 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 build. That would be great if I could compiled just when I did that. Can actually look at the spec file while we're at it. We don't need to. We need these. Why are these red? Let's see when we're back to. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I have two testing frameworks installed, so it picks up one of them and messes up the others. That's unfortunate. That before, also looking at the wrong test. Here it is. Milestone ID is actually this one. So this only worked because the can create was there. So if all the tests were passing, it was just not working the way I wanted it to. There we go. And we are actually not going to do that. We have a project set up here. So just need to make sure that the prioritization framework ID is this. Oh, it's not. Sorry, my bad. There we go. Here it is. Oh yeah. Let's add an option here. Framework ID. You know that you can. No, this one is Christmas. So prioritization, or the worst word of the prioritization framework. There we go. And we need to import it from with from the Prisma client. That should work for now. And then we can create the project. We're going to create the project with the, and actually just for funsies, let's have a different default than the one that I want. Why are you ready? Can't find that. Should be there. That's probably TypeScript stuff. Let's go back to the class. We are going to add a framework ID. There we go. That means we can now remove that one. And the rest, that was not a lot of tests. That should be fine. Meanwhile, this one is built. You can see that this one is expecting our milestone ID. Yeah, I'm not getting a milestone ID. You're doing that. You're using that. Actually, if that's all you do, we just need to check for the result. But there should be another file error here. There we go. We're gonna change that one. Set the milestone ID. I can see that my camera went haywire. For some reason, we should just remove the framework ID, and that should fix all the build-outs. Let's see if I can restart you. Worst camera ever. Actually, it's not. It's actually quite cool, but it's not a good webcam, so I need to look into that as well. All right, where are we now? We're compiling. Google Code is really slow for some reason. Come on. We can run the tests anymore. This is really handy, by the way. I have iTerm set up on a quick shortcut with a visor, so I can just pop the terminal over everything whenever I want to. Sorry if it's flashy, but I highly recommend that setup. You always have a terminal straight at your hands. Now it's actually rendering and working. Hopefully that would be all of the places that I have compile issues or compiling issues. That was not true because that one is still complaining. Framework, did I misspell it? Yes, I did. Framework, I mean, right? Ah, there we go. Now we should have everything working. That means this word test, we can just import that because we don't need it. Actually. Okay, so where are we at? Waiting for the build to run, waiting for the tests. Let's take a quick look at the cast vote implementation. We reduced it with a couple of lines. I hope to get it down a little bit further. Still have one to do to go. We fixed the echo problem. That's great. Thank you so much. And come on. You know, it's weird. Code is getting these hiccups. It's literally, wait, if I close the AI window, maybe it's faster. Come on, almost there. Tests are running. So far, so good. Come on, Daddy wants a green build. Another benefit with clean code is if you can reduce the amount of code you have, the less checking and the compile time you need, right? Because you're using less code, you know? We're actually linting and everything's checking out with the types. So we fixed the builds. We removed two parameters. The tests are running. So I think we're in the clear. Getting uh, one of two to-dos out of the way. Build is done. Let's just have a quick look on these tests. I think I'm asking a little bit too much of my computer right now, which is weird. Come on. So these tests are usually done by now. And unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer this time. All right. While that's running, let's take a look at what we're going to do next. Uh, we're going to go down to the cast votes, and we have this to do here. So basically, it's this input here is, I feel it's weird. And the reason I feel it's weird is because further up this chain of calls, I extract the framework and then I mutate the framework. And I'm not a fan of mutating objects. I prefer them to be constant because that's easier. It's easier to know that you set a value once, and if it's changed, it's a different object. And if you read the code, then you have different names on it. It's easier to sort of figure out what the values are. So usually if you need to change a value progressively through a function, if you have names for those stages, that's great. That then you can sort of follow what's happened with it instead of it changing on the actual mutation object. There are situations that call for mutating objects. I'm just saying that it would be easier to read if you can follow the changes. So for example, we could have a new object here instead that we would call framework with criteria. And then we can name a function here uh, called get framework with criteria, takes that and then we load it that way. But we're actually going to do something similar to that. So let's create that function. Just do a null for now. And let's create a function up here because I'm not a fan of creating function inside other functions if I don't need to. That's actually quite nice to have uh, some documentation to Copilot. But let's go for the function. Get framework with criteria. Should take a project. Doesn't need that one. It should just be my project. And we can get that from the Prisma client, just project. Done. Much easier to read. We have that. We find the framework from the framework ID. We actually don't need to send in the framework ID at all because we have that on the project. So let's do that. Then we get it. We mutate the result. What we could do instead of this one if there is a criteria, change it. Yeah, okay, cool. This should always return framework, but since we have find here, we still need to null check it. So, but we could do something like this: criteria equals that, but that's not what we want. We could do this. Here we go. Remember how I didn't like mutating? So what we could do here instead now is we do framework and criteria. We get a new object. The only thing we change is the criteria. Still something that we need to work out here though. Because we have, yeah, just gonna steal that code from down here because we need to have this as a record. Yeah, it's easier to read if you do it that way. So it's basically the typing because this is a JSON in field in the database. The typing is a little bit difficult, but if we just cast it, so it TypeScript knows what it is, then we can work with that, get the criteria. Now we have get framework ID or get framework with criteria that works just with the project. So all this code down here, we can actually turn into get framework with criteria from the project so that we remove this here. That should be a lot easier to read, and we should use that. This one can actually return it. Lovely. Thank you so much. Undefined. Yeah, it could be undefined. So if no framework return. Actually, I'm not a fan of returning undefined, so we're going to return null. You're not making very happy. Well, that one's starting up again. Now we're returning null, and because this one can now be null, we do have that check here. If we have a framework criteria, calculate the value business score, otherwise null. So null is more null is more decisive. I know that I've said a value. Undefined is in JavaScript. You get undefined when you forget something. So I prefer to send null because then I intentionally tell it that, hey, you're not getting anything new instead of sending undefined. All right, so we have a business value score. This means that this to do is sort of done because we have this loading function up here. Might move this loading function to a helper or somewhere if I need to use it in other classes or other actions, which I probably will. I will need to move this so I can share it. But for now, it's here. It's only used in one place. So I don't want it to become a public function yet because right now I can change anything in here without needing to change other places. So if I keep this sort of private inside the scope of this action, then this can change just using the tests here, and I can verify that everything works. As soon as I share this one, then it needs more tests, but it's heavier to change because if I change it, it has at least two other dependencies on it. It's a pretty good, we're not throwing, it's a pretty good function. There are things I'm not happy with it that we can clean up, but compared to what it was like 20 minutes ago, this is way better. Because now we're relying more on validated data that we have in our server instead of relying on data that is getting sent. I'm gonna add a to do for what we know there's here. It's not with, come on. Now my code is flagging. We should use the context to get the user ID. That would actually help us reduce the dependency on input from the client even more, makes the server more concise, and also we it's more um, the integrity of the data that the server is working with is more like it has higher integrity because the server actually relies only on data that it has as much as it possibly can, and it only asks the user or the client for the input that is required by the user, and everything else is like validated in the different parts of the architecture here. So that's good. Um, Here we go. Average votes here, I'm not too happy with. Um, there's a reason why I'm not too happy with the average votes here, and that's because if we look in this prioritization lib that I did, there is actually a calculate average votes in here. And this one has tests on it, so I would prefer it to be here. So this is what I mentioned in the beginning, that I found more duplicate code. And this is actually, we had 3 different ways of calculating the average votes in different things. So we're going to, because I think we're running out of time a little bit, I'm just going to add some to-dos here to plan out what the next steps are. So average votes here should be, you could probably, this one's probably fast. To do, use library function. There we go. That would actually remove quite a lot of code, to be honest. Let's do that. That sounds fun. And there's probably, when I think of it, if I remember the code, we will find a bug in the average code calculation just up to date based on what I'm seeing here. And that's based on a typing thing that we also should refactor. So let's actually do this. Calculate, what was the one? It was calculate average votes. There we go. Calculate average votes. And we send votes. And we should import this. There we go. If this one works, we will assume it works in this code and verify it, that it works in the tests for the other code. But that means we can actually remove those lines of code as well. This is starting to look way better. It still needs to load and map the votes. There's nothing we can do about that. It still needs to calculate the business value based on those votes and then recalculate the averages and then save them. There's not much we can do to refine, to like reduce the amount of code in this function now, I think. However, this one is a little bit, there's something going on here that I want to point out and I want to fix. Because if what we can see here is the indentation is one step further in, but there's nothing going on afterwards. So once everything's updated, we actually caused an indentation here. So why did we do that? Well, it's because this one should be a guard clause. And it's a little bit weird as well, because we just upserted a vote. So this should always return the votes. There should always be a vote because we literally just say one. But this could be because we're not sure that find unique actually returns something. Reloading the milestone with the votes. This is a little bit weird. We have the milestone already. We could change this to load the votes instead. And that could probably get it. Votes. We should await Prisma vote find many where milestone ID is the milestone that we're currently on. Yeah, there we go. This is probably more like it. All right, and then because this one's just loading and then we're just using the milestone votes as far as I can tell. And we can also see that this is a little bit of a law of the Demeter. So look at this. If I mark the milestone votes here, we can find all the stuff. That's what we're using. We're doing a map, and then we're looking at the length, and we're validating the exists. There's all these dots here. We don't need them because we actually don't care about the milestone. We care about the votes. So we should use the votes instead. So let's start by doing that. Votes. Of course, that one is a bit different. So let's call it from database. For now, we're going to fix that a little bit. And we're going to do that. Thank you so much, Copilot. You're actually helpful sometimes. Not going to say that out loud too many times, I hope. And we need to make sure that we actually have this one as well because we don't want to keep the milestone up here. Boom, we just removed a few lines of code more. And then we can see that this one, if we actually do this, if no votes for database and length is equal, we could return, but we just created a vote. So if we're here, we're actually going to throw an error because this is an exceptional case. This is not what the system was designed for. If we manage to not load it, save it to the database, and then load it immediately after, we do have a bug. It's either in the loading or in the saving. But if we're here, we just created a vote, so this should not happen. So now our system will tell us if something's broken in the data up here. And the more tests we add, the more this will be massaged. So this is actually quite nice, but that means we can remove that. And that means we can remove that. We got rid of a little bit of indentation. And then I want to move the votes up there. I think that's easier because then we have all the vote handling here. We could, if we want to, create a single function to get all the votes in the correct format, but I'm not sure that this is the format that I want going forward. Depends a little bit of the refactoring of these two functions that we're about to attack in a little bit. We have the to-do there, and then we need to do make sure this is correct. So just as a reminder for now, let's make sure everything is building and everything is that all the tests are working. They probably won't because this will change the output compared to how it did before. And that's actually something that I want to correct. So let's run the test. We have 4 failed tests because it claims that these are empty. Why? I was just looking at that. This one is not empty. Could be because I was editing the files at the same time. Let's see what it says now. Oh, seriously? I need to get a new webcam. I also need to make sure oh, my microphone should be working. It should be working. I'm in the yellow on my bars when I'm talking. Hopefully I'll see what I can do. I have another microphone that I will try it out the next time. Uh, Hopefully we can end up with a better scenario. Oh wait, I could try this. Okay, is this working? Is this better? There we go. Keep waiting. some things happened with code. Oh, we're building, so we kept everything intact from a TypeScript perspective. The tests, we have one failing test. These are worrying me. We just checked that file. It actually has tests in it. Here we go. Cannot convert undefined or null to object. This means, isn't that exactly the file that it's complaining that it doesn't have any tests in it? Let's see. Source, server, routers, connections, load. These are old files. That's why. Ugh. Cast, respect. Actually, we can just remove both of them. There we go. There's something in my model file that is not draft cast vote twice. No. Weird. Let's remove some more. Removing code is the most cost-effective way of doing software development. Remove the code. Test types. These are really old files. Interesting. Now it's starting to look better. These are already checked in a different name. Let's do that. Generators, TRPC, partials, entity reference. Okay, generators, TRPC, templates, entity reference, HSD. So these are the files that the generator will look at to generate other things. I renamed them though, so I think these just showed up from the AI closing the AI window because they were in there for a bit. Generators, TRPC partials, entity reference. Good. Not happy with the other way. These three files, but at least they're not in the way. We're compiling, and this should solve the test issues, except for the one that actually was a failing test, which is this one. And it was crashing in the implementation online. There we go. So we have a crash here because this one, the project criteria, is undefined. And that can actually happen if nothing's set up. It shouldn't happen in this case because if we look at my setup, I just changed this one to actually the project that I set up. It should have a project framework ID already set. It's set here. That's the project. That's the one we're returning as well. It's saving. So that's a little bit weird that it didn't show up. But I think it could be because we're actually fetching the project from the database. So that's a little bit weird. Project here. First thing we do is find the project from the database. Let's do poor man's debugging here. Could step into it and all that, but quicker way would be to run test cast vote. It should run only my cast vote test. And the observer will see that I'm actually running my test against a real database. I preferred it to be in memory. Alas, Prisma doesn't support that. But here we can see that I have a framework prioritization ID that's loaded. So, framework prioritization ID, that should actually be there. Oh, of course, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the project criteria. My helper, of course, needs project criteria. That's not the other one that showed up. It's actually the one we want. It's a record string with objects ID weight number. That's what it is. Perfect. And we can fix the spelling mistake as well. Thank you. And this time I will add it to the parameter list. This means we can actually do prioritization framework criteria is either that or, yeah, sure, why not? And now, if we run the test, we can actually run the test here and run test vote. We should get a different output. Still not going to pass the test, but it will continue because it will get an empty object here. Oh, it will pass it because I'm not looking at that kind of output. Okay. Let's look at the test. I can now add project criteria like this. These should be percentages, so it should be 50-50. Now we have something, not that. Never do this. Okay, if you want to use the impact on effort, it should not be defined as a weighted scoring. It should be used, you should probably just use the predefined one. But we're going to fix that as well in a little bit. We don't really care about the result down here. That's why it doesn't really, we get impact, we get effort that actually matches what we're doing here. Does the calculations correctly. Everything's passing. All right, fair. The tests are passing. But that means, if we look at our progress, we check for the project. We don't need the console log. We check the project. If we don't find the project, then we're going to throw. And then we make sure we add the vote to the database. We get all the votes from the database because we're calculating the averages. And then we also need them to calculate the business value score. We use the project values primarily, so we're not relying on stuff coming in from the client. We know that the tests are passing for this now. Get all the votes, calculate get the framework with criteria up here. We reduce the mutation of the framework by creating a function that returns a constant, so we don't have to change any code down below. Reduces the amount of indentation that's filed, so it's literally here when we're creating stuff that we have 3 levels of indentation. But that's otherwise we're pretty clear on indentation. So this is way more readable than it was before. We have a to-do here to make sure that we're doing the calculation of the average votes correctly, but this is a major improvement on what this file was like before we started. So I'm actually going to check that in. I'm going to add plain model changes. I'm going to add the server router action implementations for milestone. We need, since I changed the model, my router for the milestone actually changed, so we're going to add that as well. And we did, well, to get everything to compile, we did change the voting form component because However, there's a component there that I don't want to check in right now, so I have to type everything out. Here we go. This is a very nice. We did change the TypeScript. They're all definitions of the action calls, so they're all in the SOB file because I use that to validate any generated form and any input coming in as well. So it all conforms. And what did we do in helpers? Did we do anything in helpers? Yes, we did. That's the test helpers. I should rename that file. Git source lib helpers. So that's a pretty nice. I'm gonna add the clay file. The clay file is the clay file is an index file that the clay generator uses to keep track of what files is generated, and then it's using checksums to see if a file needs to be regenerated based on changes to the model or based on changes to a generator. So if I'm doing heavy work with like the architecture and like how things adapt together, I can actually do a clay watch and then just edit my templates, and my entire code base will sort of ripple and adapt to it. So that's fun. But it's not all the time you get to be in that kind of environment. This is a pretty nice commit. Refactoring of the cast vote action, less reliant on external data. Still have two to-dos in it. One is not related to that, but we're going to push that up to my branch. Everything's testing, everything's building, so we're all green. I'm going to clean these files up. I just want to take a look at them before we go. I need to pop over to work. So thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. Will helping me figure out the, the microphones. Sorry about the webcam acting up. I do have a like bigger microphone that I will try to mount up next time, but I'm traveling for the weekend, so I won't be using that microphone till next week, and hopefully I can have that set up. The sound will be better. I hope you like this, like live coding, refactoring stuff. Please check in more times. I'll probably edit the files a little bit to have like a compromised or like compressed version of this available on my YouTube channel or on the YouTube channel as well. If you don't want to just wait for Visual Studio Code, this is where to sort of start rendering its UI. All right, but thank you so much. I really need to pop off to work. I got a little bit caught off up in this refactoring, but there's some refactoring coming up because I want the code to be clean before I merge into my master branch and continue with the next feature. Again, thank you so much. Hey, like, subscribe. Hey, I'm apparently supposed to say that if I'm on YouTube. All right, have a really nice day, or even if you're another time zone.